Assalamu alaikum, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In this segment, we are going to talk about verbs and we will finally get to ghair sahi af'al, so irregular verbs, or in other words, verbs that are not standard. Everything so far that we've done is based on standard verbs. So we are going to understand in this lesson what exactly is meant by irregular verbs. And this is going to be a relatively straightforward lesson because we are just going to understand the different types of irregular verbs. And then in subsequent lessons, we will talk about the rules associated with the different types of irregular words. The basic idea with irregular words is to make words easier to read so that they sound smooth. And this is something that you will see over and over in the Arabic language. The Arabs love their language and they want it to sound good. So sometimes rules are changed in order to make the word sound good. We need to learn the different types of irregularities and we need to practice, and there'll be several rules, but the point of going through these lessons is that we will then recognize the different types of irregularities and we'll also recognize the different rules. And while it will be hard to constantly remember the rules, but at least you'll know where to go look to understand that, okay, in this situation we are going to use so and so rule. Now, just to give you an example of an irregularity, ain waw za or ain wa za. Whenever we have a waw, this makes the word irregular. If this is bab nasara, the standard or based on the rules we've studied, this would be written awaza ya'udhu. But Arabs don't like to say awaza. After a fatha, they like to say, they like to have the alif. So instead of saying awaza, they say aza, ya'udu. This basically means to seek protection. So ya'udu is present tense of fail mudare. So ya'udu means he seeks protection. A'udu would be I seek protection. Aza would be the fail madi version. So he, sought protection. But anyway, the point here is that the logic behind these irregularities has to do with making words sound better. Okay, a quick recap of the different types of verbs that we've seen so far. All right. When we talk about the distinction or the different types of words based on time, we have fail madi and fail mudare. So this would be the past tense and the present / future tense. So this is past and this is present / future. Then we can create a categorization based on the file or the subject. So what's the difference between fail ma'ruf and majhul? Can somebody remind us?
The active and passive.
Yeah,
verbs.
so maruf is active, so the subject is
Active.
known, and majhul is passive, so the subject is
Object.
the
Subject is
subject is
not known.
hidden. Yeah, this has to do with the subject. So maruf means known, so subject known. Majhul means subject is hidden. Okay, then we had lazim and mutaaddi. So this is based on meaning. Lazim is basically intransitive verbs and mutaaddi is transitive. So intransitive means that the verb doesn't require an object. So if I say that he is sitting or he is standing, verbs like sitting and standing don't require an object. Whereas if I say that he is helping, then the question becomes who is he helping? So helping is a transitive verb. So this is another categorization of verbs, whether they are intransitive or transitive. And now we come to a final sort of categorization where we create a categorization based on the root letters. So they are words or verbs which are sahih and then ghair sahih or irregular. Okay. So before we get into the distinction between Sahih and Ghair Sahih, we need to recognize that there is a difference between Hamza and Alif. And this is a very important distinction because we need to understand this distinction before we get into our conversation. And one reason for understanding this distinction is that many of our irregular words involve the use of Hamza. So the first difference between Hamza and Alif is that a Hamza will have a harkat. Harkat would mean that it either has a fatha or a kasra or a dhamma, whereas an Alif does not. So I will actually give you these 4 points and then I'll illustrate those points using some examples. A Hamza can show up anywhere. So a Hamza could be at the start of a word, it could be in the middle, it could be in the end. An Alif, however, is never at the start. With Hamza, the preceding letter can have any harkat or a sukoon. So if you have, for example, a Hamza, before the Hamza, we could have a letter with a fatha or a kasra or a dhamma, or it's also possible that the previous letter has a sukoon and then the Hamza starts with a fatha. Whereas with an Alif, the preceding letter can only have a fatha. And finally, Hamza can be a root letter, but Alif can't. So if we see Alif, then that Alif is not one of the root letters. Okay, now let me explain through some examples. If you see this word insanun, is this first letter, is this an Alif or a Hamza?
Hamza, because
it's clearly Hamza because it has a harkat, it has a khasra. What about this this Alif over here? Insan. This is an Alif. So it's preceded by fatha. So notice, an Alif only has one purpose in life. The only purpose in life for an Alif is to extend the sound. So extend the fatha sound. So over here, what's this Alif doing? It's making it insanun. So an Alif simply extends the fatha sound, whereas a Hamza is much more powerful. A Hamza is actually a real letter. A Hamza can have any of the harakat, zair, fatha, zamma, kasra. It could have a sukoon, whereas an Alif is something that only has a fatha before. What about over here? Anharun. Notice the first Alif is, the first letter is a Hamza, and this one again is an Alif. So with insanun, what are the actually I won't get into root letters here. Root letters we'll see later. Ummahatun, here again we have this is Hamza, and then this is an Alif. All right. So with these examples, all the rules that I've talked about hopefully make sense. Okay, now that you've understood the distinction between Alif and Hamza, remember that with irregular verbs, the Hamza is going to be crucial. There are two other letters that are important in the context of irregular verbs or ghair sahih verbs. These are the haruf-e-illat, and they are two. Illat actually means disease or illness, or also weakness. So the two letters that create an illat or an illness or a weakness are waw and ya. So these are the two huruf-e-illat. All right. Now let's look at the different reasons for why a verb can be irregular. There are three broad reasons. One reason is that Hamza is one of the root letters. The other possible reason is that we have two harfe sahi in the two same harfe sahi. So for example, adada, this would be considered irregular because the dal appears two times. So even though we don't have Hamza, we don't have any harf-e-illat, so we don't have wa, we don't have ya, but we have a sahi letter appearing twice. So this also is an illat. And the third reason is where one or two of the root letters, and again, emphasis here is root letters. So with the first one, Hamza is one of the root letters. For the second one, two similar harfe sahi as root letters. And then one or two root letters are harfe illat. Again, harfe illat, waw or ya. So these are the three broad reasons for being ghair sahi. And the reason we are emphasizing ghair sahi, there are three reasons for this. One is many of the verbs in the Quran have either wa or ya or hamza, or they have a root letter that is repeated. And then the rules that are used to make fail madi, fail mudare, and all the mazid fi, the rules are somewhat different from what we've studied before. Therefore, the first thing to be able to do is recognize that there is an illat. The second thing would be to recognize what sort of illat. And then the third would be, okay, now that we know the illat or the illness, then what is the fix? Okay, so that, is a relatively long conversation that will happen over a few sessions. But today we are just trying to understand the different types of illat. Okay. The first point I'd make is that so the first point is with fele sahi. This is the form that we've studied so far. Salim means just normal, regular, healthy. So when you see dakhala, do you see any illat over here? There is no illat, there is no hamza, there is no repeat. So this is just the normal sort of verb that we've seen. Normal means healthy, so that's salim. All right. Then we get to ghair salim. Ghair salim means that we don't have any harfe illat, but we have some other issue. So with ghair salim, either we can have mahmuz. Mahmuz comes from hamza. So hamza, so either we have a hamza, so we have three root letters, the fa, ain, lam. So we have hamza either as the first root letter or the second or the third. So here in sa'ala, where is the hamza? It's
in the middle.
In the middle. So it's an ain letter. So mahmuz, this sort of irregular verb, is where we have a hamza somewhere, as one of the root letters. So what's that called? You need to learn these names, because later on your first diagnosis would be, okay, is this mahmuz, is this mudaf, is this ajwaf? So I hope you recognize where mahmuz is coming from. This is coming from something that has a hamza. Okay, so I hope that's easy. Mahmuz sounds like hamza. Mudaf basically means to double. So mudaf refers to a situation where a given root letter appears twice. So for example, dalla. So the ain letter is dod, the fa letter is dod, the ain letter is lam, and the lam letter is also lam. So when a given root letter appears twice, then that's called mudaf. All right, so now you've learned two. So you learned mahmuz and you've learned mudaf, which means double. So mudaf is where the root letter appears twice. Then the next four have to do with illats. What are the two harfe illat? So somebody who hasn't spoken up yet. So
wow and ya.
Yeah, so the harfe illat are waw and ya. Very good. So all these next four will be based on waw and ya. So this category called mithal will be where there is an illat at the start. So of the three root letters, if the first root letter is an illat, then we call that mithal. So based on what I've been saying so far, if I tell you that there are two types of mithal, what do you think those two types are?
Either it starts
One.
with wow or it starts with ya.
Exactly. So there's the one that starts with wow is like mithal wow, and the one that starts with ya is mithal ya. Okay, so mithal, a silly way of remembering this is just think that okay, mithal comes in the beginning. Examples, you know, with good teaching, you get an example right up front. So mithal means that either you have a wow or a ya right up front. Ajwaf. Can you guess what ajwaf means?
It's in the middle.
In the middle. And ajwaf or even jawf or ajwaf basically means the hollow center. So when you have an illness in the middle, so that's a waw or a ya in the middle, such as qawla, then you call that ajwaf. Again, we'll have two types of ajwaf, either waw or ya. And naqis means sort of incomplete. So what do you think this category means?
The last letter is a
Yeah, exactly. So the last letter is either a waw or a ya. And then the final thing, lafif. Lafif means that you have both a waw and a ya. And that, happens with, this, for example, waqaya. All right. So I'll say this so that you can remember, and in subsequent lessons, we'll now start with mahmuz and discuss mahmuz and then just go down the list. So mahmuz means what? So Dr. Ghani,
with the hamza.
mahmuz means?
Hamza.
Somewhere, exactly. Okay, Dr. Shafiq, what does mudha'af mean?
There should be a wow in the middle, wow or ya in the middle.
No, mudha'af means that we have a given root letter that appears twice. So we don't have any illat, but a root letter appears twice.
Yeah.
Okay, so Aziz Saab, what does mithal mean?
Wow comes in, or wow or ya comes in the beginning.
Exactly. Mithal means waw or ya in the beginning. Ajwaf means waw or ya in the middle. Naqas means waw or ya at the end. And lafif means that we have two harfe illat. All right. So these are our categories. I'd like you to learn these categories. And I'm going to quickly test you over here because I just made you, remember this. So let's see if you can tell me. So anybody, Hamza, Mim, Ra. So what type would this be?
The mahmuz.
Mahmuz. Very good. Yeah. Okay, now someone else, the Seen, Ra, Ra.
Double one.
Yeah, the double one. The Muzaf. Very good. The Ra, Hamza, Ya. This is actually two illats over here. A given root, so sometimes you can have more than one illat. So what's going on here?
This is both the mahmuz and it's also the naqis.
Naqis, very good. Naqis is where you have a problem at the end. Okay, what about this next one?
And this one's mahmuz and mudha'af.
So this is mahmuz because of rams. Yeah, mahmuz, and it's also the mudaf. All right. And the same over here. What about waw, qaf, ya?
Lafif.
Lafif. So lafif is the last one which has more than one illat. So I hope you've recognized that at least you very quickly, you are now in a position to quickly catch what sort of, to diagnose the illness. All right, so the moment you see a root letter, you can diagnose the illness. The tough part is when you see a given word to figure out what are the root letters. That's not so easy when you have words that are based on root letters which have an illat. So that will come with experience and practice. But for now, this is it. In the next class, I'm going to start talking about the rules associated with Mahmouz.
Arif sir, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had earlier spoken about Hamzatul Wasl.
Yeah. So
how does that fit in over here?
Okay, very good question. So how does Hamzatul Wasl fit in? So let me just clarify what's going on here. So we are drawing a distinction between Hamza and Alif, right? So Hamza literally is a proper letter, whereas Alif is simply sort of an extension to Fatha. So when I say Fa Ilon, this is an Alif because it's simply an extension of this Fatha. Whereas this Hamza could have a Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma. Now, we talked earlier about Hamzatul Wasl. Hamzatul Wasl is, so there's actually the Hamzatul Wasl. Hamzatul Wasl is where we actually skip over the Hamza if we have a situation where the previous letter or the previous word or the previous letter has some sort of a harkat. For example, when we say unsur, okay, what does this mean?
Help someone.
Okay. Is this a alif or a hamza? The first letter.
Hamza.
Okay. If I were to say, if for some reason I have a fa before, will I say fa unsur, or will this hamza sort of get jumped over and will I say fansur? Fansur. So this is an example of Hamzatul Wasl. So Hamzatul Wasl, that's why we call it Hamzatul Wasl and not Alif Wasl, because it is a Hamza, it has a harkat on it, but Wasl means that in situations like this, you will skip over it.
Yeah, can we say that Alif is never in the beginning, and whatever with the harkat comes in the beginning is Hamzatul Wasl or Hamzatul Qata or whatever?
Okay, so let me take each of your comments, and most of them are right. So you said that Alif will never be in the beginning. That's correct. So I'll actually go back because this is an important distinction. Okay, so we have said that Alif is never at the start. Okay, so we can say that. Hamza can show up anywhere. All right, so that was one point. What was your other point?
That it will have a harkat. It may be silent or it may not be silent, or it may be.
Yeah, exactly. Hamza will always have some harkat. It might have a fatha or a kasra or a dhamma or a sukoon. But if before that, some Hamzatul Wasl, others are not. So for example, if you remember a Mazid fi Babs, Bab, Bab-e-Ifal. So Akrama, this Hamza is not a Hamzatul Wasl in the sense that if there is a fa that comes before, you would still say fa Akrama. But if we have the last three babs, Mazid fi Babs that we studied, does anybody remember them?
Yeah, the infa'ala,
exactly.
ifta'ala,
Exactly.
and istaf'ala.
Infa'ala, or sort of istansara. Infatara is an example of this. So infatara. Okay, so is this Hamza or Alif? The first letter with infatara.
Hamza.
This is
Hamza.
Hamza.
Okay, but if I have a fa before or some other letter before with a harkat, then this is a Hamzatul Wasl, so it will become fan fatara. So with the last three babs, in fa'ala, and then we have istansa,
Ifta'ala.
ifta'ala, and istansara.
Istaf'ala.
Istafala, istansara. With those last three babs, the first Hamza is Hamzatul Wasl, whereas with Akrama, the Hamza is not a Hamzatul Wasl. You will always pronounce it. All right. That's probably a long answer, but I hope so. Dr. Shafiq, did
What
that
was that
answer?
called again?
That is Hamzatul Qata.
Yeah, I
Has
think,
to be there.
yeah, I think Hamzatul. I forget the name. So Hamzatul Wasl is where you skip over, and then the other one is, not Hamzatul Wasl. Okay. Any other? Is that clear now?
Right. So basically, for every word where a Hamza is used, it's either going to be Hamzatul Wasl or it's going to be the other one, Hamzatul Qata.
Exactly. That's true.
Okay.
And while we are at it, while we are like dissecting the alifs and the hamzas, I'll just quickly suggest.
And may I say, when a word is starting with Hamza, it should be either Hamzatul Wasl or Hamzatul Qata.
Exactly.
And the
Very true.
it is always going to be Qata.
In the middle, yeah, in the middle it would be qata, because you would pronounce it in the middle. Another thing, so while we are at this, just like we've talked about the two types of hamzas, wasl and qata, with alif you also hear two types of alifs, maqsura, I don't know if this is, and mamduda. Mamduda is like, do you know what madda means? Madda means to extend. So have you heard alif madda? Madda means to extend. So sometimes you extend the alif, and the rule for extending the alif, if there's an alif and then the alif is followed by a hamza, then the alif is extended. So you read it like either three, the length is 3 times a regular alif. So when you hear alif madda or alif mamduda, that means the alif is extended more. Maksura means alif is just read like a regular alif. It's not extended. So that's these are things. If you study tajweed, then this is something that you will come across. All right. So that's it for this segment. We'll now shift to the Quran.